the first thing we want to do is kind of get a feel for what different districts are using in terms of their learning management system, or their LMS, or the platform that you are using that you're going to use as part of the virtual instruction. And so we have that divided into, we are asking you to go into the chat box. So you can see on the slide that's in front of you that we're asking you to go look at that little chat feature, and you can see that chat feature here on the bottom. So there is a bar that comes up, and on that bar you will find that chat feature. What we're asking you to do, and we're just going to ask everybody to take just a couple of minutes to do that. We're going to ask you to put either put the 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 in the chat box, so that we can organize those of you who are participating by what the learning management system is that your district is using. So we're going to break out and do some activity in those breakout groups this morning as we begin this session today. So if you could please drop in the chat either a 1, 2, 3, or 4 with your name, so that we can see what sessions that or what tools that you all are using.
We talked about how that with Zoom, it's important to be on a device where you can get to all those different features that it has. Mainly was one of the most important things, is that, yeah, you can use a phone, but your phone will limit you on how you can interact and engage when you're Zooming.
Good point. It does. It has, does give you some limitations. So, and the thing we need to think about that's important, we consider that for our students. You know, that those might be issues that we run into, that students have trouble with accessing. So let's go ahead and talk about, so when I looked at your responses in the chat, it appears that most of this group is using Google Meet and Zoom. So for the districts that are participating, that seems to be the consensus of those tools that we're using, and that's a good thing, so that we can all talk through this process. One of the things I wanted to talk to you all about and just kind of walk through. Now, at any time, just stop me or shoot a note in the chat saying that you have a question, but let's just talk about how we set up a Google Classroom. And so I'm going to take us through that link, and so I'm going to click on this link, and we're going to take a look at, we're just going to go to Google, and I'm going to take you all through and let you all take a look at. So I'm going to go here again to the grid, and on the grid I'm going to scroll down until I find, and so mine is located at the bottom, so I'm going to go to my Google Classroom. Okay, so I am in the Google Classroom. You can see that I have several different classrooms that I have set up, and we use those for training. So it may be that you are a special education teacher and you have 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So you may want to set up a classroom for 3rd grade. You may want to set up a classroom for your 4th grade and your 5th grade. You may want to set up one for your reading or one for your math. So you really have the opportunity here to create that classroom around what your needs are. So it depends on, again, like if you have multiple grade levels, or if you have multiple contents. So I know some of us as special educators have, you know, K through 2, and we do reading and math. Some of us are more departmentalized, and we do 6 through 8 mathematics or 6 through 8 language arts. So, but for the purposes of today, let's just go ahead and talk about, let's go over here and click the button here up in the top right hand corner, this plus, and it says create a class. So we're going to create a class. So we're going to call our class for today Virtual Lessons. Okay, and so here I could decide if it was, like I said, if I had a class and it was 501 or 502, or if it was an 8th grade class that I wanted to assign this class for, I could decide what that might be. So for today's purposes, we're going to say this is for our 802 class. And this might be my language arts. And then, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create that class. So as I do that, it'll take just a second as it moves through that, and it's creating this class for me. So now when I have these classes in here, I can manage those classes at any time. So here you can see it gives me that virtual lesson, and it gives me a class code. So you can have a class code here, and that you can share with your students. So if they need to log in, and they can use the class code, or you can invite them. And we're going to talk about that process of inviting them to that classroom. So you can see, so those things are up here. Now, up at the top, you can also see, you can have a meeting link, and it will allow you then to connect, to generate that Google Meet. So if I wanted to meet through I can set that up. So for this class, and I'm going to use Google Meet, then I can just click that link, and that would be able to set that link up. So let's see. So I'm going to see, I would just have to generate that link. And so there's my link, and I want to save that link. And so now I have a link. So my students can go into the classroom, and I may have this scheduled. So I may have my reading class scheduled at 9 o'clock, or I may have a one-on-one session with my student. If I'm providing one-to-one, then I would have this link. And so my student could log into their Google, and they could go in their Google Classroom, and I know that from 9 to 9:30 on Tuesday and Thursday that I'm meeting with this student via Zoom. And so, or you can use via Google Meet. So here, that is a great tool or resource that you can use if that's the way you want to do your small group or individual instruction. Now, the other thing up here at the top, so that is the stream. So anything that I drop or put information here goes to my class. So you may have 8 or 10 kids on your class load that you're working with through this classroom. So if there's something that you wanted to communicate to your entire class, you can drop that here in communicating with your class, so that you can share, you can pose a question, you can have students answer that, you can give them overarching information that you want them to know. And then if you look here at the next tab over is Classwork. So we're just going to click on that, and we're going to look at that Classwork. So here I am able to create assignments and questions. And then I can organize those by topic. So let's say I'm going to create. So I'm going to hit the button Create. And so right now I want to create material. And for this one, I might call this one Special Education Resource Room. And I'm going to put here ELA lessons. Okay, and so I'm going to click this button then, Create. And so I can add Google Docs, I can add slides. So if I had a PowerPoint I wanted my students to watch, then I can go here. If I had a form that I wanted them to do, I may have a formative assessment that I add here that I can do through forms. What I will do then is, once I have that one, then I'm going to post that assignment. So then I can post that assignment here. And so add a topic. So I can add a topic. So you see now I have created that in my classroom, Special Education Resource Room. So if I wanted to upload a tool, let me just show you. So if I wanted to upload a tool, I might want to add, another quiz. So I might go here, and then I just say I might just say ELA quiz. And then I might have them answer 4 out of 5 questions, or I might have them respond, or I might have it true and false. I may have a true and false. I may have open-ended questions or open response. I may have multiple choice, but I'm going to give them the directions here. So whatever the students I want them to do with this, I'm going to give them the instructions for completing that quiz. Okay, so, and that's what I would do. I would just create that, and I would add that. And I would use it, I could add the Google Docs. And then I could create that tool. I could create it, or I could already have that quiz and I can upload it here. So then I go here, and then I can assign that. And so that's where, if you go, so that's where your coursework is. So there's my ELA quiz. So if I had students that you wanted to give them a quiz, or you were doing a formative assessment, you could drop it right there in that section there. The other thing is with people. So let's say so I've got myself listed here, and then I would add students. So I would add, I might add, let me see, just Vonda. I'll add Vonda because her name will come up. So I might want to have Vonda Adams join my class. So I'm going to click Vonda's name on there, and then I'm going to invite Vonda. So everybody that's in our session today, I would invite you to this classroom. And so if you wanted, so the students that you wanted to participate in this class, so if you think about your caseload, and you've got 20 kids on your caseload, and you want so many students that you have so many students that you're working with reading, or you have so many students that you're working with math, or you have some students that just have behavior goals, then you could create a classroom for those students. If you had kids who had just behavior goals, and you could upload social emotional tools in there, social emotional learning videos, you could do that. You could schedule sessions with them so that you get that one-to-one. So those, you could have both synchronous and asynchronous opportunities with meeting with students virtually this way. And then over here, you would have the grades. So we'll not go through that process and set that system up, and it just takes you some time to think about what tools and resources you want to add to your classroom, and as you plan and think about those lessons. So does anybody, I'm going to stop right there and let you all ask questions or comments. So if you're good to go, how about you use that tool again on the reaction, and give me a thumbs up or a check, or drop it in the chat that you're good to go. All right. Good, Crystal. Okay. Oh, and Vonda put in the chat about the features for an iPad, and they may look just a little differently. Good to go. All right. We have a great bunch already. You guys are already moving right along with that. I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm going to move back then to our document here. At the end of today's training, you are going to have access to this document, and I'm going to just email it to you. So you will have all the links to all the tools and resources that we have in this document. So anybody have any questions or comments? So you're pretty good to go on, what platform you're using, and you can think about now, you just have to get in that Google and try it out. You can upload tools. You can always edit those. You can delete those. You can remove those as needed. So we're good to go on that. We'll go ahead and start talking a little bit about how we establish procedures. So one of the things, and our team can all talk about this, one of the things that we've learned is that if you're using that virtual classroom, or you're using that virtual tool, or if you're teaching a lesson, you have to have some protocols set up in advance. And, we can speak to that because we learned some things the hard way, right? We had to go through that process for us and that learning. For instance, we may have set up a training, and you have to front load that. If you want your students to show the video, if you're doing a one-to-one with students and you're going to have them respond to you and you need to see them, you want to let them know ahead of time. So you want to think about what your classroom procedures might be, or how you're going to have students access things. And so that's one of the things. How are you going to let kids access that? Does someone have a question? Okay. So are you going to have students access materials? If you're going to use a Google Classroom, for instance, kids can go in the Google Classroom and have access to the tools that the resources and the tools that you put in there. As you plan a lesson or a unit, think about what materials your students are going to need. Are they going to need some handouts? Are you going to have to get some things to kids on the front end of that? Are they going to need some manipulatives? And are there some manipulatives that they have around the house that they could use? So for instance, Vonda and Stephanie are going to do a lesson and talk to us a little bit about algebra tiles. So if you're going to teach an algebra lesson, what might those students need if you're using that virtually? What can you provide them on the front end of that so that they have the materials that they need to do those lessons? So if you're thinking about how you're going to do that, or the things you're going to do for a period of time, you may want to think about how to get those materials and resources out to students as the school year begins. Also, how are you going to have kids ask questions? If you're doing a session, and just like today, how are we going to have participants ask questions? Are you going to raise your hand? Are you going to have them drop a question in the chat box? Are you going to have them have their video on and give them those expectations that during that one-to-one that you're doing through either through Zoom or through Google Meets, then you want to establish what that protocol would be. And then also how you're going to have them submit their work. So if you use, for instance, the Google Classroom, their work can be submitted and uploaded right in the Google Classroom. So they can do their work on there. in a Google Doc or a Google, whatever it is that you want them to use, and they can just upload that right into that Google platform. And so what are you going to do also for students who are absent? And thinking through those things, it's really important as we plan and move through that, because we have to think about that. So if we have students that are not able to log on that day, their internet's out that day, what are we going to do for those students? So one of the things we could do is we could record those, or we can capture those. We may have to reschedule another time to meet with that one-on-one session with our students. But we want to think through those processes and think about how that would look in our classroom. So I'm going to show you guys on this link here, and again, you will have access to all of these tools, but I'm going to give you a link here. This one is a video protocol. And so this one's from, you can Google this or you can access it, but this is Remote Learning 101. So this one tells us really how do we set up a protocol for whatever kind of video call we're using, whether it's a chat, a Zoom, if it's Google Meet, if it's Teams, whatever it is that we're using. Let's think about what it might look like to set that up in our classroom. So this one is a video that just tells you how to set that up. So if you want students to raise their hand, it'll give you directions, and you can watch the video on how to have students raise their hand, or how they use that feature in that platform to raise their hand. So you can see this Remote Learning 101 has all kinds of tools that you can use. Like this one is, setting up your learning management system. This one's designing lessons. This one is setting up video calls with our students. So when we think about that shift that we're moving forward through that virtual lens, we think about that delivery, how we want to deliver our lessons and how we plan those lessons. So that's going to be an opportunity for us. I see that we can really design good, solid lessons that we have that are archived, that are available. So, if you taught that lesson and your student didn't get it, can they go back and watch that again? So, that's an important thing for our students, especially our students with disabilities, because, sometimes they don't get it the first time. So this gives them multiple opportunities for practice. And then we think about how we have them with feedback. We have them respond to some kind of question, or have them, again, ask a question and have them answer in the chat box. So that one, I just wanted to let you guys look at that one, and you can watch that video, but you, again, will have those links. So I'm going to just close that out one, and we're going to go back to our virtual lessons. Another tool here is the classroom management. So we're going to take a look at that. Again, these are all things that we want to consider as we're planning and thinking about those lessons. So on this page, this one is a tool just thinking about virtual classroom management tips. And there are lots and lots of resources out there, but I just wanted to talk through a couple of those. So for instance, we're talking about classroom management. We've got to set those rules and expectations up. So we learned that at the Cooperative, as we've been providing professional development, we want to set those expectations up ahead of time. So we often use a slide that has kind of what the expectations are for the participants, like, use your video, use your chat feature, be attentive while you're participating, make sure you're responding. So those are all on a slide that we use every time. So if you come back, so if you're thinking about our students, and we tell them sometimes, I've told you that, or I explained that to you, but they just don't remember, or it's brand new to them. And a lot of the research that tells us as we transition to this virtual learning experience is that we really have to model that for our students. So it may be that every time that you go into a conference or a video conference with students through chat or Zoom or whatever, is that we have to review those expectations. And we may have to do that multiple times. And that's the same thing we do as we practice that in our classroom. It's just transferred then to this virtual experience. Another one is thinking about, what is our routine? What are we going to do first? Are we going to have, are you going to put up a question and you're going to have them respond? Is that going to be kind of your bell ringer activity? Are you going to use a formative assessment of some sort to, for kids as they log on? What are you going to do as they're joining in your classroom? Now, and sometimes you may be doing group work and you don't have the video on because, we may not have permissions for all of our students to be on the video. Those may be issues with confidentiality. So you may say, when we're doing small group, we don't use the video feature, we use the chat feature. So Just thinking about what those routines are going to be. What are you going to do first, and then what are you going to do next, and then how are you going to, how's your lesson going to flow? And so the other thing is, how do we deal with discipline issues in the virtual classroom immediately? And we will have those issues. We may have kids making face at each other, or kids in the background giving rabbit ears to their brother or sister who's on that Zoom meeting. But what are we going to do about that? How are we going to address any kind of those issues that we have that come up in our Zoom? If we pre-plan for those, then we are much more likely to be successful for that. And so we're just going to have those expectations and protocols. And again, that could just be simply a slide that you just revisit, just like you do your classroom expectations. We may have to revisit those, and we may have to revisit those multiple times till kids get the hang of it. And we're going to have to let them practice.
Hey, Dion.
Yes.
I'm trying not to yell because I don't want there to be an echo, but one thing I wanted to bring up, there was a fabulous article, and I think it was on Edutopia, but it could have been on one of my social studies Twitter accounts that I follow. And this one teacher actually talked about the importance of using the virtual background, because especially when you start talking about, students that, do not want to really show, and that could be like one of the lessons or one of the protocols that maybe you just make everybody use a virtual background or whatever. And I know that it eats up bandwidth sometimes, but if the capacity is there, and Jennifer Carroll is phenomenal at talking to this stuff, but this one teacher talked about that she actually had her students, all of them, do a virtual background, because she said that she did not want to make students uncomfortable about, where they lived or how they lived, and like if the house was messy or whatever it may be, and that kind of thing. And she actually taught special populations, and she talked about that because she didn't want anyone to be worried about what was behind them, and that kind of thing. But when you said that about the rabbit ears and stuff like that, that made me think about that. But that's probably something for a discussion later, but that was a great article that I read. I'll find it to you and send it to you. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, we can link that right into this tool, and so that the teachers that are joining us today can later access those as well. Okay, great. Thank you, Kim. Doug has also shared something with us in the chat box. He says, keep in mind, virtual classes should mirror what you do in the regular classroom or the school day. So be professional in appearance, dress, environment, voice, language, conduct, etc. And that is such a good point, because we are representing our practice and our profession. We have an opportunity to make this a really good experience for our kids. We have embraced this as it become a necessity, but we have an opportunity to make this a good experience, a good learning experience for our kid. But that is such a good point, Doug. Think about what's in your background. You think about that professional look. We want to be dressed. We want to have, we want to look professional when we join, because we don't know if those children's parents are joining. But it's just important that we convey ourselves in a professional manner. So I think that's a great point, because sometimes we don't think about that through that virtual lens, when we're engaging in that. But I think that's great. Thank you, Doug. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to that? Okay.
Dion, I'll add something that I've been thinking about for a few days, and that's recess. When our kids come to school, they have opportunities for recess and some different social opportunities throughout that day. And I think it would be so cool to do virtual recess or virtual PE, something like that, and have a structure set up by the teacher so it doesn't get out of hand. But especially in the time of a lot of home quarantines and things like that, I think that is so crucial for our students to have an opportunity to have that resource or that recess and that opportunity just to be with each other for a few minutes, even if it's some sort of structure provided by the teacher, meaning, hey, we're going to have one breakout room where we're going to talk about I don't know what the coolest game console is, but maybe this console, maybe we're going to have another breakout room where we're going to talk about makeup or something like that. I just think those opportunities being controlled by the teacher would be so cool to have. And I think that would increase your engagement too for that virtual learning piece. And it it might not make kids want to hate it, but might make them look forward to it. And that could even be maybe a reinforcer for students that, hey, when we finish the math lesson, we're going to have 5 minutes of recess.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. You know, Cheryl, when you think about that continuum, when you think about that hierarchy of needs as well, we are missing that social piece often.
Yeah.
So it may be that you start one of your classes just having them tell what one thing was the best part of their week last week, or what is the best thing that's happened to them today. And then think about that before we just jump right in to say, okay, this is the lesson, this is what your expectation is, these are always the rules. You know, before you do all of that work, we want to absolutely stop and think about just that rapport and those relationships with students, because we are very, isolated when we're remote like that.
Yeah, definitely so. I just, and I heard something I was reading the other day about kids getting to their online class on time, that will still have that time, and that those times where kids are going to be late for whatever reason. And that would be a good way to start out the class. If you could have lunch with any person, dead or alive, who would that be and why? Some of those things to engage students and get them there on time, because we know if we have half the kids coming in 30 minutes late, that's probably not going to be successful either.
Right. That's right. And again, that's really why you want to have that, thinking about that structure. I think that's a good point, Cheryl, thinking about that. I think Denny's got his hand raised here, so I don't know if you guys can see that on your screen, but Denny's got his hand raised, so that's
I was going to see it. I was also wanting to see if that thing was working, that raise your hand. And that's if you go down to the participants button at the bottom of your screen, you can click on that participants button, and then you got that option to raise your hand. So that's a good feature when you're with students, and certainly, we've used that in face-to-face classrooms since the beginning of time. So just wanted to throw that in there. And then also I wanted you to think about the fact that Zoom has, and I'm not as familiar with Teams or Google Meet, but I know that Zoom has some options for the host to go in and disable the students' ability to change their names on the screen, so that they couldn't put anything inappropriate there. They also have features where you're able to minimize their ability to chat privately and those types of things. So I just wanted to throw that in there as a way of classroom management. That's certainly something to be aware of. And, if you just Google Zoom and their protocol, there's quite a few articles about some of those special features that we really probably outside the realms of this meeting don't have time to go into. But anyway, I'll hush and turn it back over to Kat.
Good point. Anyone else want to just jump in there and share any thoughts on that? Again, those are things that we maybe didn't think of when we jump right into, okay, I'm going to start teaching a lesson. And again, we've learned that here the hard way. We've learned these things through trial and error. So don't feel that if the first time it didn't work, the first time we tried to break out in groups today and it didn't work. So there's going to be times when things don't work. We just got to keep charging through and remember, what we're doing. It is that we want to deliver high quality instruction to our students. We want our students we want to be able to provide the supports and the resources for our students. And to move them forward. So we're just going to keep that in mind. And again, we will have glitches. We will run into some things that we have to work through and we have to learn. Last night I was up at midnight trying to get my Bitmoji working. So it's an experience for all of us to I'm trying to set my virtual classroom up and with my Bitmoji. So, again, I didn't get enough sleep last night because I was trying to get that to work. So it's a process, and it's just some trial and error. But let's go then back to our virtual lesson. And then, so that one kind of takes us here to where we were talking about, establishing those virtual procedures. Just be thinking about those. And you're going to have this tool that we're using today. That's the reason I've used this tool as instead of a PowerPoint today, is that this is my lesson. This is my design. So you could do the same thing with this. This is created, through a Word document and uploaded into Google Slides. You could use this same tool and add videos, add materials, add resources that you want your kids to access. And actually, you can have them in there at multiple people can be in this Google document at the same time. So if you're working collaboratively, so if you're co-teaching and you're working with your co-teaching teacher, this is an excellent way to deliver lessons or to put in your specially designed instruction into that lesson and how that lesson plan flows. So this gives us an opportunity to share those lesson plans virtually. So you can look at what that 5th grade lesson is or that 6th grade lesson is, and you can think about how does that support your student. So you can use those, you know, collaboratively. So it's a good opportunity because we may have to think about that, how we're going to make that happen in our classrooms. So does anyone have a comment or question? We good? Any thumbs up? Practice, we'll let you practice that thumbs up or annotating or dropping a note in the chat. Great, all right. And if you don't, like again, you just keep trying. Great, thank you guys, thank you. So let's talk just a little bit about the standards. And let's see if can you guys see this screen? I'm going to enlarge this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So I have added this right into our step 3 of our lesson planning, and you'll see the link there is for the Kentucky standards. And so as we're thinking about that lesson design, we got to think about what that standard looks like. What is it that we're teaching? What's this unit of study that we're working on? What is it that we're teaching for this particular lesson? So you can look at it through the lens of either a lesson or a unit. And I would recommend that you think about that as a unit of study. So let's think about how we're going to put this material and this content together in a unit of study, because it's just a good way to organize our material and our thinking. But we're going to think about what those goals are. What is it that we're intending with this unit of study? And what is our targets with that? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Now, if we're thinking about that in terms of what our goal is for that student on their IEP, and we're going to practice with some IEP goals here in just a minute, but what does those goals look like? So the reason I put the academic standard here, and I want you to be able to link those. I want you to be able to go back in there and look at those and think about what standard it is for that grade level. And so I just put a 5th grade lesson, a 5th grade sample up here for composition. So this one, if you'll see, the C is for composition. That is a 5th grade standard, and this is standard 1 for composition. We're asking students, this is what we're asking students to do at the 5th grade level. So if I know what students are expected to do at the 5th grade level, and I have a 5th grade student who has a disability in writing, and that is on that's on the 2nd grade level, I need to know what that expectation is for that student at the 5th grade level, because that's where my student is going to be assessed. So I need to know what that looks like. And then I take those skills and I pick out those critical skills that they need, and then I design my lessons. I backward design that. So I may have to move back to see what that composition standard looks like at the 2nd grade level, and I design my lessons. But it's so important that we keep that in mind and that we always go back and when we visit those standards. So you'll see this link here. I'm just going to click on that link. That takes us to the Kentucky Academic Standards. And so it is here at your fingertips when you want to plan your lesson. That's why we wanted this tool to be user-friendly, that you use this tool as you do that design, that lesson design. And so you can see here, you can just click on Exploring Your Standards. And right here is the link for, if you need to look at the reading and writing standards, if you need to look at the academic standards for math, if you want to look at that social studies standard and what that looks like. So here is the access for all of the standards. For science, you've had that health and physical education. You have performing arts, science. So anything that you're thinking about and planning that for that delivery of instruction, you have access to those materials right here and those resources. So that link is live and active, so you'll just have to click on that and access that. But it's so important as we're thinking about moving forward with that lesson plan or that unit plan, is to think about what that grade level standard is. Because even though our students are at least 2 grade levels below, they are still assessed at that grade level. We are still expected to move students. So if we know what it is that's expected, then we are much able to scaffold that, to break that down into chunk and use that specially designed instruction to meet that need of that student. So I just wanted to bring that to your all's attention and share with you where that's at. And I wanted you all to look at this one and think about, if you look at this particular standard that I have up on the screen, it's the composition. And in composition, we have A, B, C, D, E, and F. Well, if a student doesn't have mastery of A, B, C, D, E, and F, then they don't really have mastery of that full standard. So we can look at it. Is it A, if we look at A, if we're having students write, and whether we're having students write in ELA classes, if we're having students write in science classes, are we having students write to respond to social studies content? We want to look at that and so we see what that expectation is for that student. So I guess it just allows us the opportunity and the thinking about how do we know to pinpoint what those skills are our kids need. So I think that's important, and I want you guys to be able to look at that and link to that. So that link would be right there. So I'm going to have to think about, if I'm doing a unit and I'm working on composing opinion pieces, then I'm going to have to make sure that my students can do both clear and coherent writing. But I also need to, so can they have organization? Do they have a skill or a strategy for task, purpose, and audience? I may have to teach those things. I may have to back up. I may have to use a graphic organizer like Raft or a tool to teach my kids what they need to be able to do in order to do this. So I may have 3 or 4 lessons or 5 or 6 lessons here in this unit to get my students to be able to produce a clear and coherent writing. So just an example of that. It is right now, I usually try to use for online trainings that 50-10 rule, and we've been sitting for about 50 minutes. So if we could just pause and take a 10-minute break right now for everybody to get up, move around, get you some more coffee, stretch your legs, and to rejuvenate, since we've sit here for about 50 minutes, then let's take just a 10-minute break and come back together at 10 o'clock on the dot. We'll be back at 10 o'clock.